Hello there. Pokemon Crystal released in the UK in 2001, just a year after the release of Yellow. And just like Yellow, Crystal serves as a kind of definitive game of its generation. I didn't actually play through Crystal when I was younger, but I do have a funny story about it. One day on the way home from school when I was about 8 or 9 years old, I found a copy of Crystal just laying there in the middle of the street. Being a massive fan of Pokemon, I already had my own copy of Silver, but being a kid and finding a free copy of Crystal in the street felt like I just found literal crystals in the street. It's probably comparable to finding a winning lottery ticket as an adult. Now I live in Scotland, which is in the UK, and it rains a lot here, so I thought it would probably be broken. But it was dry and in perfect condition, so I ran home as fast as I could. I stuck it in my Game Boy, and miraculously, it worked. I played it all day, and I was probably the happiest kid in that moment. But eventually, I had to go to bed because, I had school the next day. So I saved my game, turned off the Game Boy, and I went to sleep. Now let me tell you, the next day at school, all I could think about was getting home and playing with my recently found lottery winnings. But I also didn't tell anyone I'd found it out of fear someone would say it was theirs and I'd have to give it back. The school bell rang and I f***ing flew home. I probably did the Naruto run home before the internet made it an extremely cool thing to do, but that's when it happened. I turned on my Game Boy and I saw it. New game. There was no option to continue. The internal battery memory thing had died. My little crystal heart was shattered. And remember, I was only about 8 or 9 years old, so I didn't know that that was a thing that could happen. I just thought it was another shitty thing to add to my already tragic childhood. Even now, I don't know how the battery could have died so early after the release, so maybe it did get wet from the rain or something, but either way, it makes for a funny story to tell people whenever Pokemon Crystal comes up in conversation. Not that that happens very much, so it's a good thing that I made this channel, so I can share this shit with you. You're welcome. I have no idea what happened to that cartridge, so today we're going to be looking at the Pokemon game that got away. Pokemon Crystal. As always, I'd like to mention I will be looking at these games from the point of view of the average person, to find out if an average person's experience is indeed an average experience. To help me break down my thoughts on the game, we're going to be looking at the following 5 things. Number 1, the story and the setting. Number 2, how the game plays. Number 3, the characters. Number 4, how the game performs. And finally, we're going to finish everything off with number 5, the conclusion. If you haven't already, I'd recommend going back and watching my video on Pokemon Yellow, as this is the second video in a series. I'm going to be comparing each game from the last, and I explain the game mechanics and how this series functions in more detail back in that one. Also, I should mention that if you want to play this game yourself, I'm going to be as vague as I can about certain things, so there'll still be plenty for you to discover. But there will be spoilers, so you have been warned. And with all that out of the way, let's get this shit started. In Pokemon Crystal, our story takes place in the region of Johto, starting in a quiet little place called New Bark Town. Unlike Yellow, in Crystal we are now able to choose whether or not we play as either a boy or a girl, which is good for all you ladyfolk out there. And another new feature is we have to set what time and day it is. This means we now have a day and night cycle, but I'll talk more about that in a second. Also, our mum gives us a little gadget known as the Pokegear, which holds our phone and a few other things we'll collect along the way. Now we're ready to start our journey by speaking to this region's Professor Oak, a man named Professor Elm. But before we do that, we should take note of 2 things. Number 1, people in this town are rude. For example, this lady makes fun of us because our mum gave us our Pokegear. And then right afterward, this guy sneaking around Elm's lab just full on kicks us for talking to him. What the fuck? But it's not all bad news, because number 2 is that it is nighttime in game. As I mentioned before, we now have a day and night cycle. This means it gets dark at night and light during the day. And certain Pokemon will appear depending on the time, and I think it looks cool at night, which is a great feature. Now, let's go talk to Professor Elm. Professor Elm is like a younger and nerdier version of Professor Oak, and he asks us to raise a Pokemon for him in order to help him with his research so he can present some kind of paper at a conference. However, just after asking us this, he received However, just after asking us this, he receives an email from a man named Mr. Pokemon saying he's made a major discovery. According to Professor Elm though, Mr. Pokemon has never discovered anything noteworthy in his life. But he asks us if we can go check out what he's talking about anyway. Then he lets us choose our starter Pokemon. In Crystal we get the choice between Cyndaquil, Totodile and Chikorita. Cyndaquil is this fire echidna kind of porcupine thing. I had to Google it to find out. Totodile is a little water crocodile. Pretty obvious, pretty cool. And Chikorita is a... What is Chikorita? Apparently it's a grass dinosaur. Anyway, I'm a basic Echidna and I always go for the fire echidna, Cyndaquil. Now that I have my starter in hand, I head on out to meet Mr. Pokemon. As we leave town, another new addition to this game is the little signs at the bottom of the screen which let us know where we are, which I find pretty snazzy. But what is even snazzier is what happens when we get into our first wild Pokemon battle. Not only do we notice it's a new kind of Pokemon that we haven't seen before, but the Pokemon now do unique little animations when they appear, which not only adds a ton of character to the Pokemon, but it also breathes life into them. I'll get back to that later on in the video though, when we get into how the game plays. Continuing along this path, we encounter yet another new feature to this game in the form of berry trees. This one gives us Berry. Berry is a free healing item, although we will obtain different kinds as we progress through the story that have different uses like Prison Curry Berry. After foraging, finally we make it to a place called Cherry Grove City. We ignore the homeless man, naturally, and make our way to the Pokemon Center to heal up for our journey ahead. How's it going? Afterward, if you happen to talk to this lady, she informs us that the homeless man we passed earlier is giving out free maps. So we go talk to him. He shows us around town and he makes a banging joke about the sea, as you can see. And then we walk him back to his house. He gives us a map card for our Pokegear and then he goes inside. So remember kids, the moral of the story is the best kind of homeless people are the ones that have houses. Moving on. Finally we make it to Mr. Pokemon's house and he presents us with his big discovery, a mysterious Pokemon egg. He tells us he received it from a couple who run a Pokemon daycare facility and he wants Professor Elm to have a look at it because he believes it'll help him with his research on Pokemon evolution. Also, Professor Oak is here and he gives us a Pokedex. On its own, this is a cool little cameo, although him being here will be a little more relevant later on in the game. Wink. As we leave Mr. Pokemon's house to deliver the egg to Professor Elm, we get a phone call from the man himself. He informs us that something terrible has happened and he needs us back at the lab for some reason. I'm going to ignore the fact that he is a grown man calling us, a little child, for help. Because in the last game, we were a kid and we took down an entire criminal organization. So I guess kids back then were just built different. Anyway, we Naruto run our way back there. Along the way though, we bump into the mysterious piece of shit that was sneaking around Elm's lab earlier. He straight up just calls us a bitch before challenging us to a battle. He sends out a Totodile and we beat him pretty quickly. But I feel kinda bad for his Totodile. It's not his fault that his trainer's a fucking dickhead. I mean, look at this little dance. Anyway, after we beat them, the mysterious dickhead tells us his name. It's a secret. I'll tell you what it is in a second. And then he proclaims he's going to be the greatest Pokemon trainer in the world. Sure. Before rushing off in the direction we just came from. With that settled, we continue our Naruto run back to Elm, and once we get there, we notice that the police have already arrived. He tells us that a Pokemon was stolen from the lab by someone fitting the description of the guy that we just battled, and if you look at the table where the Pokeball that contained Totodile was, it's gone. We tell the police officer that we just battled him, and he told us his name. His name was Crystal. Yep, I'm creative. I know, and Crystal will be our main rival for this game. The officer thanks us for our help and then he scurries off to do nothing as we never hear anything about this ever again. We then give the mysterious egg to Elm. It's funny though because he almost has a heart attack when we show it to him and it's kind of like he's never had slowpoke sausages and Pidgey eggs before. Maybe he's a vegan. Ugh. Anyway, he says it's a major discovery and then he gets extra excited that Oak gave us a Pokedex, stating that because Professor Oak sees potential in us, we may have what it takes to become the champion of Johto. Calm down. It's a bit much, but he finishes this by saying maybe we should try to take on the Pokemon Gym Challenge. But before we leave, we should talk to our mum. And that is the introduction to Pokemon Crystal. It's a little bit longer of an introduction than Yellow got. It's not perfect, but it's a hell of a lot better than Yellow in my opinion. A big issue I had with the previous generation was that the legendary Pokemon were left out of the main plot. Back then we didn't have guides on the internet. You either got lucky finding them, scoured every area, or saw it in a magazine, or someone you knew told you about using signal fires. So I guess that was something they wanted to fix in Crystal, as the main kind of quest we have here other than becoming the region champion is tracking down the legendary Pokemon on the cover art of the game. Suicune. Early on in the game we enter this building called the Burnt Tower. Inside we come across a man named I'm going to call him Eugene. So Eugene here tells us that he's looking for Suicune. He's hot on its trail and apparently it's somewhere in this tower. The guy next to him named Morty also tells us that the gym leader of the town we're in has to study the legendary beast Pokemon known as Suicune, Entei and Raikou. So he decides to help Eugene investigate, which means there are other Pokemon just like Suicune in the world. Very cool. After looking around a little bit, we bump into Crystal and he challenges us to a battle. And I suppose the battle was so epic and destructive, leading us to breaking a big hole in the floor that we fall into, landing in a cave underneath the tower. And in this cave, we find them, the legendary beasts, Suicune, Entei and Raikou. Although, when we approach them, they run away. So this little interaction here I think is a nice way to introduce you to the legendary Pokemon of the game. The building we find them in also has an interesting bit of lore. Apparently when the tower burned down, 3 Pokemon inside died from the fire, and a rainbow coloured Pokemon descended from the heavens like gay Jesus himself and resurrected them. They then became the legendary beasts. Now as cool as it would have been, unfortunately it wasn't gay Jesus. But it was another legendary Pokemon that we will discuss later. Throughout the game we track down Suicune in a couple of different places, and then after defeating Team Rocket, again, we finally get the opportunity to catch it. So that's the main side quest done, but there's more fun to be had. Team Rocket are back now, but they are a failing organisation, desperate to find and bring back their leader, Giovanni, who we defeated in the last game. It would seem that Giovanni stayed true to his word and decided to leave Team Rocket. So we take on the last of his high-ranking members instead as they try to restore their organisation by cutting off slowpoke tails and making old men fall down holes. With all that out of the way, let's talk about this game's main quest, our journey to become the champion of Johto. Just like in Yellow, we need to defeat 8 gym leaders to acquire their badges in order to take on the Pokemon League's Elite Four and become the Johto champion. First up, located in Violet City, we have Faulkner, a young lad who's taken over his dad's gym using flying type Pokemon. Second, in Azalea Town, we have another child named Bugsy, who uses, you guessed it, bug type Pokemon. He uses a Cypher, and that's the coolest thing about him. Next on our list, located in Goldenrod City, we have another child named Whitney. She uses normal type Pokemon, and a lot of fans of the series hate her because she uses a Miltank that uses a move known as Rollout. It also has high defense and can heal itself by drinking its own milk. Remember, I didn't make this game, I'm just playing it. Fourth, we finally have an adult. Morty, the ghost type gym leader, and this is the guy we found with Eugene searching for Suicune. It kinda makes me wonder if they chose ghost type for him since he's studying the legendary beasts that are said to be dead Pokemon brought back to life. Kinda makes you think. Fifth, we have Chuck, found in Cyanwood City. This out of shape karate man uses fighting type Pokemon, and his wife really wants him to get back in shape. I can relate, Chuck. I can relate. The sixth leader in Olivine City, and a personal favourite of mine, is Jasmine. She utilises a new type added to this series, the Steel type Pokemon. Although the only new Pokemon she uses is a Steelix, but still, it's a cool addition. Seventh, in Mahogany Town, we have an old man named Price, the Ice type gym leader. And that's pretty much it. He's an old man. And finally, the 8th and last gym leader, the mythical dragon tamer, Claire. And I'm not joking, that's actually her name. It seems like they got a little bit lazy with their names at the end there. She also doesn't do herself many favours, as when you beat her, she goes in a mood and doesn't give you her badge until you prove that it wasn't a fluke by finding an item in a cave. Epic. And that's the Johto gym leaders. A pretty forgettable cast in my opinion, with only 1 or 2 highlights. I honestly couldn't remember any of them before playing it again, and then I recognised a few like Faulkner, Whitney and Jasmine. But now we have all of our badges, we can move on to the Johto Pokemon League. But wait, in a shock turn of events, just as we're about to walk into the league, our rival, Crystal, stops us for one last battle. We beat him and his Pokemon up one last time, and we literally never see him again. He's just dead to us now. back to the important stuff, the League. The first member of the Elite Four this time around is a man named Will, a psychic type user who has a cool character design. He kinda looks like a magician or an anime Gambit, but ultimately it's a pretty forgettable character. He uses a Xatu, Jinx, Slowbro, Executor, and his highest level Pokemon is another Xatu at level 42. Next we have a returning character from the Kanto region, the historically accurate Ninja Koga. Koga was a gym leader back in Yellow that utilised poison type Pokemon. Here he uses Ariados, Venomoth, Forretress, Muck, and his highest level Pokemon is a Crobat, which is level 44. I think it's pretty cool to see him return in another role in this game, almost giving the impression that even though someone can become a gym leader, they can still move up in the ranks. The third member is another returning character from Kanto, our resident Ryu lookalike, Bruno. Here he is using a Hitmontop, Hitmonlee, Hitmonchan, Onix, and his highest level Pokemon is Machamp at level 46. Again, it's cool to see another returning character, but I'm not sure why he would go from Kanto's Elite Four to the same role in Johto. Maybe he's paying homage to Ryu, being that he travels around the globe looking for strong opponents to fight. Maybe they're lazy, or maybe it's just fan service. Who knows? The final Elite Four member we battle is a lady named Karen, who uses another new Pokemon type added to the series, the Dark type. She uses an Umbreon, which is a new addition to the Eevee family, Vileplume, Murkrow, Gengar, and her highest level Pokemon is one of my all-time favourites, Houndoom, at level 47. I enjoy her team, so I'm going to pass on the obvious jokes I can make about her name. You know what I'm talking about. Okay, now for our final challenge in Johto, we have the champion, Lance. So this reveal is kind of hinted to earlier on in the game when you're hunting down Team Rocket and Lance helps you defeat them. Like I said, it's cool to have returning characters, but I think this one could have been handled differently. And I'll explain how I would have done it soon. This time around, Lance is using Gyarados, Dragonite, Charizard, Aerodactyl, another Dragonite, and his highest level Pokemon, another Dragonite, at level 50. Maybe he could have done with losing one of the Dragonite and adding a Kingdra instead. But anyway, now we're finished with the Johto Pokemon League, we get our data added to the Hall of Fame. And here, we're officially crowned champion of Johto. Hooray! So that's the end of Crystal, right? Actually, as I expertly alluded to earlier, there is much, much more. Personally, I realised that my team and the opponents going through the game seemed to be pretty low level, and the fact we had so many returning characters from Kanto made it feel like Kanto and Johto were connected in some way, and that's because they are. After defeating the Elite Four and becoming the champion, we are now allowed to travel to Kanto. Making our way through this cave, we find ourselves in Kanto, and here we take on all the gym leaders from Yellow. And eventually we get the chance to face off against our strongest opponent yet. But first, we battle Brock again, Misty has a new design, Lieutenant Surge is here, Erica is here, Janine is here. You know, Janine. Like, she's the girl ninja that takes over Koga's gym. Keep up. Then we have Sabrina, Blaine, and taking over Giovanni's gym is Mr. Coleman, our original rival from the last game. After all that, if you really want to challenge yourself, you can take a hike to the top of Mount Silver. And here, you can battle Red, the player character from Yellow, Red and Blue. And his team is pretty high in the level department, with a level 77 Venusaur, Charizard and Blastoise, a level 73 Espeon, a level 75 Snorlax, and finally a level 81 Pikachu. Bringing back the main character from Generation 1 is such a cool touch, and it's funny that they pretty much hit the nail on the head with the team. Other than Espeon is pretty much a perfect match of what I used in Yellow, and I swear I didn't mean that. Also, this isn't the last we will see of Red, so keep your eyes open for him moving forward. So that's everything story-wise. We do have some optional legendary Pokemon like in Yellow. We don't get any of the original Kanto ones, but in Johto we can catch the legendary birds Ho-Oh, aka Gay Jesus, and Lugia, objectively the coolest legendary bird. Then we have the other legendary beasts we mentioned earlier, the counterparts to Suicune, Entei and Raikou, and they are a pain in the arse to find, let me tell you. Since they are roaming Pokemon, they move around the map and you will have to either get lucky finding them randomly or follow a guide online to increase your odds of locating them. Also, back in Yellow we had a Pokemon called Mew, who we are unable to catch through legitimate means. And this is the same here in Crystal, as this game's equivalent to Mew is Celebi, a cool little time-travelling turnip thing. I'm sure I've heard that there were events back in the day that you were able to get them, but it doesn't help us very much now, does it? And that's everything I can think of for the story of Pokemon Crystal. So let's move on to our next section, Number 2, how the game plays. Pokemon Crystal is better than Yellow in more ways than one, although it still has a couple of issues that make the experience, let's say, a little annoying at times. But it did release only a year after Yellow, so due to the quick development time, a lot of the game's issues can be forgiven. First, let's look at the Pokegear. It's this little gadget that our mum gave us that holds our phone, a map and a radio. The map is the only useful thing here. The radio, which is only really relevant to the story once when we were tracking down Team Rocket, as they are emitting a signal on there that is making Pokemon go crazy, I think. Because in this one town where we find them, there's a place called the Lake of Rage that has a red Gyarados in it, which I should mention is a shiny Pokemon. Now shiny Pokemon are really hard to find, and if you are lucky, you might find one in the wild. There's a range of different methods to shiny hunt, but through this playthrough I didn't find one, so I'm going to leave it there, and if you want to know more, you can go ahead and look. I can't actually remember if those two things were connected, but it's only really used for little side activities other than that. And the phone is a f***ing curse on humanity. Too many kids have them, text messages and social media have single-handedly destroyed human psychology and social interactions. And that's just the stuff in real life. It's arguably worse having a phone in this game, because this little asked for my number, right? I don't even think I was able to say no. Then she repeatedly called me every 5 to 10 minutes telling me she just saw a Weedle or some shit like that. She did give me a little gift one time. That was quite nice. But I deleted her number pretty soon afterward. And then our mum, the woman who cast this curse upon us, has the balls to phone us every 10 to 15 minutes to tell us she's spending our money. At the start of the game, she offers to hold on to a percentage of the money we earn from battles, like a savings account. You can refuse this offer, but I'm pretty terrible with money, and I thought it was a smart thing to do. But she calls us, like I said, non-stop, telling us how she found an item or something we might like, and I bought it using your money. And honestly, I can't ever remember thinking, oh, that's handy. I'm just joking. I love both my virtual mum and my real mum. Next, I'd like to mention that the Pokemon storage boxes in the PC are still the same as they were in Yellow. There are 14 boxes that hold 20 Pokemon each, although if the box you are using is full, you won't be able to catch any more Pokemon until you manually change it, which is bad, and I don't like it. Also, you still can't narrow to run in this game, so it's slow walking from town to town until you get a bike or are able to fly. But it's not all doom and gloom, as they have improved the item bag. It now has different sections dedicated to different item types, and it holds larger quantities of items, meaning less likely for you to miss out on stuff or sell anything just because your bag is full. One section of our new bag holds our healing items like potions. Another one gently caresses our balls. One has our key items like our fishing rods and our bike, just like in real life. And the last one contains our TMs and HMs. And it even tells us which TM is which now, so you don't have to waste time activating them each time to find out. This is by far the best improvement made to the generation, and I'm extremely glad they added it. But speaking of TMs and HMs, they've added some new ones, so let's have a look at them. I'm not going to go through the TMs because there's a ton of them, and I'm sure there's new ones also, but they added a couple of new HMs, so I'm going to focus on them instead. The first 5 were in Yellow, so I'm not going to go over them again, so if you're curious, go back and watch my last video on Yellow to find out. HM 1 through 5, Cut, Fly, Surf, Strength and Flash. And the 2 new mechanics are HM 6, which is Whirlpool, and HM 7, which is Waterfall. Why they felt the need to add these, I don't really know. Maybe it was an attempt to try and make Crystal feel like a bigger game, or just like an improvement. I don't know. Whirlpool lets us pass over whirlpools that you only really need when catching Lugia, and Waterfall lets you climb waterfalls. And that's pretty much it. It's pretty pointless if you ask me, but what do I know about exciting gameplay? I'm just an idiot in his 30s talking to a camera about a kid's game. I'm a gamer. The Pokemon Center and the Pokemart make a return in this game too, and will be a series standard for the time being, so I'll just cover them quickly. Pokemon Centers are where you heal your Pokemon for free and store your Pokemon inside the PC. And the Pokemart is where we buy healing items, as well as Pokeballs to catch... I thought it wasn't recording. And the Pokemart is where we buy healing items as well as Pokeballs to catch Pokemon. But in Crystal we also have another mechanic. We can collect acorns and give them to this man to make different kinds of Pokeballs for us. I actually remember thinking to myself, Oh, I'll go back and make different balls so I can talk about it in the video. But I forgot. There was this other big building which I think was a battle tower, and I did the same thing here. Like I forgot about it, but I bet it's pretty cool. Let's talk about Pokemon battles. Battles in this game work exactly the same as they did in Yellow, but they did make improvements to the presentation. The colours are better, the experience and health bar look nice, but the best part of the presentation they improved is the cool animations Pokemon do now when they slide into the screen. I love this. I remember being a kid, and when Pokemon started to move, I was like, what? I would hunt around for new Pokemon just to see them move. Like, my childhood was shit. I needed anything to keep me happy. Kids these days born into a world with ray tracing and rocket fueled PCs don't know what it was like for us, okay? This was the shit. It really helped bring my imagination to life, and I still think the little pixel art animations look great, even now. Going back and seeing just how much the series has evolved over the years is crazy. And speaking of evolution, let's talk about that. As I mentioned in the last video, I said that evolution by special means gets less and less explained as the series goes on. And that is true for Crystal. There was items you could use in Yellow like Firestones, and you could also trade certain Pokemon with friends to make them evolve. And you can do that here also. But what if I told you they introduced even less obvious methods to evolve Pokemon? Like by making your Pokemon like you and leveling up with Crobat, or by making your Pokemon like you and then by leveling up during either day or night like with Espeon or Umbreon. How about making your Pokemon hold a certain item and then trading it with a friend like with Caesar or Steelix, who by the way are 2 of the 4 new Pokemon added to this game with the Steel type, which on its own is a brand new type, so you think they'd make it more accessible for players so they can use the new thing they added. You can get a Forretress if you are lucky by headbutting a tree, but I shouldn't have to give my character brain damage to experience the new type you added. Also, no one wants Forretress. We all want Caesar, which brings me back to Jasmine, the Steel type gym leader, who uses a Steelix and 2 fucking Magnemite. Why not give her a Caesar or a Skarmory? The only good thing they added with evolution in this game was the Pokemon eggs, which you get from breeding 2 of the same Pokemon with different genders. You can also use one Pokemon and a Ditto as a replacement instead, but I forgot to do that this playthrough, so I don't have any footage here to show you, and I'm not going back to do it because that kind of defeats the purpose of the video. This is a review of what I did on an average playthrough, to see what the game did well and what it didn't. And I suppose you could take away from that I forgot it was a thing because it wasn't talked about very much, even though it was the thing we started off the game investigating. But I will say I used to spend hours breeding and hatching eggs so I could raise my own team all from level 1, so they felt more like mine, like my babies that I raised for war, not just some strays I found out in the woods. So before we both forget what the point of this video is about, let's move on to our next section. Number 3, the characters. All the characters are terrible. Moving on. Alright, okay, I'll talk about them. Like I said before, the characters of Johto are largely forgettable. To me. I mean, the only new characters I like are Jasmine and Chuck. Oh, there's also these geisha girls who use different evolutions to battle us, which is pretty cool. But I like Chuck because I can relate with the whole middle-aged martial artist whose wife wants him to get back in shape. But Jasmine might be my favourite new main character. The first reason would be the juxtaposition between her and her Pokemon type. She's like this cute younger girl that uses a massive badass Steelix. What's not to love? And second, she has character, in the sense that before we can battle her, we have to get some medicine for her to use on a sick Pokemon she's caring for. But other than that, I can't really think of anyone else. Eugene annoys me a bit because even though it's been his life's goal to find Suicune, we just walk in and do everything he's ever wanted to do. And he isn't mad or jealous or anything. He just tells us we're amazing every chance he gets. I mean, I know I am, but fucking hell. It would have been much better if he was initially mad that we scared them away and then decided to compete against us to find the legendary beasts. And after seeing us catching or defeating Suicune, he would admit defeat and praise us for our hard work. Also, the amount of returning characters from Kanto in Johto's league, on top of going back to Kanto itself and fighting all the gym leaders there again, was kind of overkill. This one scene where Lance has his Gyarados use a Hyper Beam on a guy inside of a shop is pretty funny though. I mean, even our rival is kind of forgettable in Crystal. It's as if they just tried to make a more mean, annoying version of Gary Coleman. The entire Johto section of the game is a bit underwhelming in the character department. One thing they did alright though was the inclusion of Red. The way he doesn't speak is a nice addition, and his party is pretty much identical to the one I used for yellow. It took me a few tries, but after beating him, you do feel like you've accomplished something. Evidently, I wasn't a big fan of the cast that Johto introduced, but the 100 new Pokemon they added are a different story. I actually think the Gen 2 Pokemon are amongst the best. The starters are cool, but my least favourite, unfortunately, is Totodile's final evolution for Ralligator. The design just doesn't do it for me, but its Cyndaquil and Chikorita lines are on point. Some of my favourites include Ampharos, Slowking, Steelix, Granbull, Scizor, Sneasel, Skarmory, Kingdra and Smeargle. We even get a couple of new evolutions, Umbreon and Espeon, which are the best evolutions, and I don't care what you say. We both know it's true. We get new baby Pokemon, Pichu, which is obviously the baby version of Raichu, Cleffa, which is the Clefairy baby, Igglybuff, that's the Jigglypuff baby, and it's very fun to say. Then there's Magby, Elekid and Smoochum, that are the baby forms of Magmar, Electabuzz and Jynx. Finally, there is Togepi, the baby form of Togetic, and fans of the show will know all about this little egg thing. It's a nice inclusion. They are ultimately pointless, they are just for collectors, but it's still a nice thing to introduce. But my absolute favourite non-legendary Pokemon from this generation are Teddiursa and its evolved form Ursaring, Houndour and Houndoom, and the unofficial kings of Johto, Larvitar, Pupitar and Tyranitar. It's almost impossible not to find something you like in this lineup, and I think they smashed it out of the park with this generation. So let's talk about the legendary Pokemon themselves. First, I'll give an honourable mention to the Unknown. These are weird little Pokemon that take the shape of English letters, and in the past I spent many hours spelling words like boobs and using them. That alone makes them top tier. They are found in this place I haven't mentioned yet called the Ruins of Alph, and you can solve little puzzles inside there if you want. Unknown aren't technically legendary Pokemon, but I thought I'd mention them here anyway. Okay, onto the real ones. Let's start with the legendary Beast Trio. Suicune is an extremely cool Pokemon. Its design is amazing with the wavy tendril things and the cloud on its back, although its name did confuse me when I was young. Raikou was my favourite out of the trio growing up because I had a big thing for tigers, because tigers are cool. The last legendary beast is Entei, appearing in the third Pokemon movie, and I'd say Entei is my current favourite of the three. They're all extremely cool designs, but horrendous game design choice having them be roaming Pokemon. Next we have the legendary birds of Johto, Ho-Oh and Lugia. I was never a big fan of Ho-Oh and I'm still not really. I think the lore surrounding it and the trio is amazing, don't get me wrong, I love that, but my favourite out of the two is Lugia. Lugia for a long time I have considered to be my favourite legendary Pokemon from the entire series. Partially because I owned Silver growing up and there's probably some nostalgia blinding me, but other than that I think the design is just perfect. There's something about Lugia that screams, I'm extremely powerful, but I will fuck you up if you don't leave me alone, while also looking kind and gentle, and I respect that. It features in the second Pokemon movie, and it is in a spin-off game for the GameCube called Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness, where they essentially make it evil. 10 out of 10 design, bravo. But let's move on before I come just looking at it. The last legendary is Celebi, although we can't catch it in these games, which is a real shame, because I think it's an underappreciated Pokemon. I'm sure there was a little shrine in the game that I think was used as the way to get it from the events I mentioned earlier, but I could be lying, so don't quote me on that. Anyway, let's move on to the next section of the video, how the game performs. The graphics in Crystal aren't a million miles away from what's found in Yellow, but they have clearly improved. From the colours, the pixel art for the Pokemon, all the way to the environments. Everything looks just that little bit more aesthetically pleasing. So let's compare the two. As you can see, the colours and the details of the environments of Crystal are more vibrant and detailed compared to Yellow. This goes a long way when you're staring at the screen for hours on end, as I tend to do, because I have no life. But the biggest improvements are more apparent in the pixel art. Some of the designs admittedly don't look as good in my opinion, although the colours and complexity of the designs are enhanced. To think in addition to adding 100 new Pokemon with short animations, they also included all new pixel art for all of the original 151, and each have their own animation. That paired with the region of Kanto and Johto in the same game is pretty impressive just how much they crammed into a single Game Boy cartridge. Therefore, you'd think there would be something wrong or something missing, especially with the short development time, but I can happily say again that, like Yellow, I never encountered a single bug or glitch. That's not to say there aren't any, like I can almost guarantee there are. I'm just saying I've never come across any. And I've been playing these games, like I said before, for 20 plus years. Unfortunately, good things must come to an end though. Maybe it's just me, and it's very likely it's just me, but I can't think of a single piece of music from Crystal. Unlike the first generation that had arguably the catchiest music in the entire franchise, off the top of my head I can't think of a single track. Like, not one. Because of this, I had to look up the soundtrack on YouTube and I listened to it while I was at work. And the music is pretty good, I'm not saying it's not. The tracks flow from upbeat to calm and complexity of the tracks themselves has increased. But for me, I still think Gen 1 has it beat. It almost seems that maybe some of the magic was lost or the more complex music arrangements actually work against the game, leading to, in my opinion, a pretty decent yet forgettable soundtrack. So it seems that the trend of things being forgettable in this game stays true with the music also. And if you love the music, that's fine, I just can't remember it. So let's move on to the final section of the video before we piss anyone else off. Number 5, the conclusion. Overall, Crystal isn't a bad game. While playing it, I'd just come off the back of Yellow, and I was admittedly getting a little burnt out. However, it is in many ways an enjoyable game, and a big step forward for the franchise as a whole. The only thing that detracts from the experience was the forgettable Johto characters and the legendary beasts being arsehole roaming Pokemon. The story is still a bit meh, but at least they tried something this time around. Lacking as it was in the story department, I'm not a massive story man in games anyway, so I can live with it. I think the lore we get surrounding the Beast Trio and Ho-Oh is fantastic. It's very simple, but it really hit me in the feels, and each new town and area we visit has a nice amount of personality, which helps with immersion. A couple of things I might change would mainly be with the characters. Like I said earlier, I'd change Eugene's personality and motive. I'd perhaps have new characters in the Elite Four that represent different areas of Johto other than giving us Bruno and Lance again. I don't mind the inclusion of Koga because I like the idea of a gym leader moving up in the ranks. Obviously I'd change how we go about tracking down Entei and Raikou, and the same goes for Lugia and Ho. I'm not sure how I'd do it, but I think leaving these things up to chance whether we find them or not is a bit harsh. I'm not saying they should be guaranteed encounters, but perhaps have them hinted towards being in certain areas and make them a little easier to come across. The day and night cycle was a good addition to the series, although I can't for the life of me remember if they kept it in the games going forward, so I guess we'll just have to wait and see. It's a good thing the next game we're going to be covering is Emerald. And with that being said, let's get to the point of the video. Was Pokemon Crystal an average experience? All in, I do think Crystal was exactly that. A middle of the road average experience, not anything to write home about, but not a disappointment either. Things could have been better, but they also could have been a lot worse. Like Yellow, I didn't enjoy it as much as I thought I would, but I'm glad I played through it. I think Crystal is remembered mostly for the fact we get to go back to Kanto, other than for what it does with its own setting, which is what makes it unique, but it's ironic that its unique quality comes from bringing back the content from another game. Ultimately, I wouldn't recommend it to newcomers to the series again. I'd point them towards the remakes of this generation, Soul Silver and Heart Gold, but for fans of the series that haven't played it, I'd just say go for it. On a scale out of 6 Pokeballs, I'd give it a 3. I'll give it 3.5, and I'd like to hear from you, so leave your thoughts in the comments and tell me how you would rate it. With that said, I'd like to say a massive thank you to you for watching this far into the video. I really do hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, click that little like button and subscribe to the channel for more average experiences. And as always, if you can, remember to go outside every now and then. It's good for you. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.